awunayo mathenethu lapha. Yi-20.
21.
Awunayo mathenethu.
And then why?
Ukusakala mathenethu indaba ongane mathenethu ethu.
Yini le?
Imali
Thengani.
Mo-Africa, what if I told you that the difference between a 50 Monopoly note and a South African 50 Rand note is nothing tangible, but simply a law? A legal declaration that says this piece of paper counts as money and this other one actually does not. In today's episode, we are breaking down the legal tender system, the mechanisms that gives modern currencies its power, and we'll explore why real money still matters in a world that we are heading into. Let's get to it. Welcome back to The Money Revolution, the podcast where we empower one another to build wealth through the sharing of information and ideas about how money really works. I want to say a big shout out to our episode sponsor, Stokvel Gold. Stokvel Gold is an authorized dealer in gold and silver that is registered with the Financial Intelligence Center. Stokvel Gold assists us with all of our own gold and silver purchases at the lowest prices that you are going to get anywhere on the market. Now, if you are interested in commencing your own gold and silver journey, whilst also expanding your investment portfolio, make sure to hit the Stokvel Gold link in the episode description below, and they will take good care of you. So, Mo-Africa, in order for us to understand this concept of legal tenders, we need to do a quick recap on where our currencies actually come from. Now, as we conversed back in episode 11, we told you that before 1920, the South African commercial banks were issuing their own bank notes. Each bank essentially printed its own banknote with no single national issuer. This all changed back in 1920 after the Gold Conference of 1919, when the privately owned South African Reserve Bank became the sole issuer of all banknotes in the country. This setup isn't actually unique to South Africa. In fact, in today's world, in most countries all over the world, currency is issued by private central banks rather than governments. Modern money exists purely because the law declares it valid, and it has legal tender status and no intrinsic value in and of itself. I guess you're wondering, what is this legal tender ntontone that we are referring to? So, in section 17.1 of the South African Reserve Bank Act 90 of 1989, legal tender simply refers to any form of money that a court of law is required to accept when someone is settling a monetary debt. The law doesn't actually force businesses or individuals to accept any specific form of payment in everyday transaction. But what it does is require the courts to only recognize certain papers and coins as valid settlements when disputes arise amongst individuals or businesses. So, in other words, legal tender is money given its authority by the state, and it is used to settle obligations that come from the exchange of goods and services. Now, when you put all of that information together, legal tender is simply a representation of money that the courts must accept as final settlements. It merely says that if you end up in a court over money that you owe, the court is legally obliged to accept South African Reserve Bank notes as valid payment. Now, this single statutory requirement is what gives the 50 Rand South African note status as money, and it is the very same thing that denies the 50 monopoly money that very same status.
A few moments later.
Okay.
So we want to buy a set of bananas.
Hey, y'all, come look at this.
These. Yeah. This brings us to the fundamental revelation of this specific episode. The only difference between a Monopoly 50 and a South African 50 Rand note is their legal status. Monopoly money does not have status. It has no recognition, it has no authority to settle debt, but in terms of intrinsic value, both these two are essentially ink on cotton. It's just paper. And if anything, the South African Reserve Bank 20 Rand note has is its legislative force. It has no gold backing, it has no inherent value, neither is it scarce. It's just law. But here's the part that most people actually do not realize. Section 17 of the South African Reserve Bank Act does not actually restrict the public from using anything else as money. It only restricts what the court must recognize as money. This means that the public is essentially free to trade in either gold, in silver, in livestock, in foreign currency, in barter systems, or any other medium that they choose. What I mean is that two individuals can actually transact using monopoly money, provided that they agree, right? Legal tender laws only apply in court-enforced settlements, not in private trade. And in practice, this means that you can decide to live your own financial life on gold and silver if you decide to do that without actually breaking any law. Mo Africa, if legal tender is purely based on government decree, and if its value essentially depends on public trust, what happens when our currencies eventually collapse? History gives us an answer to all of this. Whenever fiat currencies lose credibility, societies always turn to real money in the form of gold, in the form of silver, and tangible assets that are a credible store of value. Legal tender is essentially a command. Real money, on the other hand, is consensus. One is enforced by the law, the other is chosen by the people. It's chosen by science, and it's also chosen by nature. And when a system collapses, the legal command collapses along with it. But the public consensus does not. With all this information, the question is, why do you not start accumulating real money right now, while these fiat currencies still have function of some sort, so that you are prepared when the world of paper promises no longer hold weight? Because when that day comes, and I tell you, Mo Africa, that day will come and it's not even far. Your choices will be simple. You will either be holding real money in the form of gold and silver, or a collapsing currency. We appreciate you, Mo Africa, for tuning in on this week's edition of The Money Revolution. Today, we explored what legal tender really is. We also explored why the courts recognize this 50 rand money over the Monopoly 50, and why Section 17 of the South African Reserve Bank Act actually shapes our entire monetary system. Now, if this episode opened your eyes, please share it with someone that you care about. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to get notified on our weekly episode uploads. Let's wake up the masses. Let's understand how money really works and take back our power, one conversation at a time. And remember, if it's paper, it will perish.